The elevator doors slid open on the 12th floor. And there she was. Arms loaded with cardboard boxes that teetered like they might topple any second. One slipped, crashing to the worn linoleum with a thud that echoed down the empty hall, spilling books and a tangle of scarves across the floor. I froze in the doorway of my apartment, key halfway to the lock, my heart slamming against my ribs as if it knew something I did not yet. She dropped to her knees, muttering under her breath, her red curls falling wild around her face like flames licking at the edges of a photograph. I should have walked away, kept to my routine of quiet nights and takeout containers piling up by the sink. But my feet moved on their own, crossing the threshold into the chaos she had just unleashed. As I bent to help gather the mess, our fingers brushed over a worn paperback, and the jolt that shot up my arm felt like the first crack in a dam I had built years ago. That touch lingered in my skin long after I straightened up. Boxes balanced precariously in my arms as I followed her to apartment 12B, right across from mine. She glanced back, green eyes sharp and alive, like she could see straight through the polite smile I plastered on. "Lily," I said when she asked my name, my voice steadier than I felt. "Rose," she replied, and the way she said it, soft but sure, wrapped around the word like it was hers to claim. New York in late spring hummed with its usual frenzy outside our windows. Taxis honking below like impatient lovers. The air thick with the scent of rain-soaked concrete and distant food carts. I had lived in this pre-war building for 3 years. Ever since the breakup that left me hollowed out. Sketching logos for faceless clients in the dim glow of my laptop until dawn chased away the shadows. Graphic design paid the rent. Kept the fridge stocked with yogurt and wilted greens. But it did nothing for the ache that settled in my chest on quiet evenings, when the city's pulse felt too far away to touch. Rose changed that without trying. The next morning, I woke to the scrape of furniture against floorboards, her bed frame groaning as she wrestled it into place. By noon, the hallway smelled of fresh coffee and something spiced, cinnamon maybe, wafting from under her door. I lingered outside my own, pretending to check the mail slot, until she poked her head out, apron dusted with flour, a smudge of it on her cheek like war paint. "Want a taste test?" It was not a question. Her kitchen was a riot of unpacked crates and half-opened cabinets, sunlight slanting through the blinds to paint stripes across the counter where she had set out a tray of scones, golden and misshapen. I took one, the warmth seeping into my palm, and bit down, the crumbly texture giving way to bursts of berry and that elusive spice. "Good." She watched me chew, head tilted, as if my opinion carried weight. "Better than good," I admitted, and her laugh filled the space, low and unfiltered, pulling at something deep in my gut. We talked then, easy words tumbling out over cooling scones and mugs of black coffee that she brewed strong enough to strip paint. She was a photographer, freelance gigs taking her from weddings in the Hamptons to protests in Brooklyn. Her camera always slung around her neck like a talisman. 30. Born in Seattle but chasing light across the country until it led her here. To this creaky building with its leaky pipes and ghosts in the walls. I told her about my sketches. The ones that never saw daylight. Hidden in drawers beneath safer, sellable work. 28. Chicago roots that felt like another life. Transplanted here after Sarah left with barely a note. The days blurred after that. Mornings started with her knock. Soft but insistent, offering whatever she had baked or brewed that day. Afternoons, I found myself wandering into her space, watching her sort through rolls of film on the floor, negatives spilling like secrets. She would pause, hold one up to the light, and murmur about the way shadows clung to skin, how they revealed more than faces ever could. I nodded, mesmerized, my own hands idle for the first time in months, tracing patterns on my knee instead of deadlines. One evening, as dusk painted the skyline in bruised purples, she dragged me to the roof, a forbidden perch accessed by a rusted ladder she swore was safe. The city sprawled below us, a glittering beast that never slept, and she leaned against the ledge, wind tugging at her curls. "Tell me something true," she said, her voice cutting through the hum of traffic far below. I hesitated, the air between us thick with possibility, then whispered about the night Sarah walked out. How the silence after the door clicked shut had roared louder than any fight. She did not flinch. just reached for my hand, her thumb brushing the back of my knuckles in slow circles that eased the knot in my throat. "Me too," she said simply. And in that shared fracture, something shifted. We stayed up there until stars pricked the sky, her shoulder warm against mine, the world narrowing to the rhythm of our breath sinking in the cool night air. It was small things at first. The way she remembered I liked my coffee with a twist of lemon, slipping it into my mug without a word. Or how she left Polaroids taped to my door. Candid shots of me laughing over breakfast, my guard down in a way I barely recognized. I started sketching her in stolen moments. Pencil lines capturing the curve of her jaw, the freckles dusting her nose like constellations. She found one once, propped against the fridge during a lazy Sunday sprawl. And her eyes softened, holding it like a fragile thing. "Keep it," I said. But she shook her head, tucking it into her pocket instead. A secret between us. Summer crept in, sticky and unrelenting, turning the stairwell into a sauna where we bumped into each other more often. Apologies dissolving into grins. She pulled me into her world, camera in hand, dragging me to hole-in-the-wall diners in the village where the pancakes were thicker than the menus and the jukebox played songs that made her hum along. Off-key but joyful. I captured her there. Phone camera shy against her professional gear. But she posed anyway. Chin tilted, eyes sparkling with that wild energy that made my pulse stutter. One humid night, after a rooftop barbecue with string lights flickering like fireflies, we ended up back in her apartment, wine glasses sweating on the coffee table. The conversation turned deeper, wine loosening tongues, and she spoke of her ex, a woman who had clipped her wings with promises of stability, leaving Rose adrift in a sea of what-ifs. I listened, my own story spilling out in return, the fear that had rooted me in place, afraid to chase anything that might slip away again. She set her glass down, the clink sharp in the quiet, and leaned closer, her scent of jasmine and darkroom chemicals wrapping around me. "You are not rooted, Lily. You are a seed, waiting for rain." Her words hung there, heavy with truth, and when her lips brushed mine, tentative at first, then sure, it felt like the storm breaking. I kissed her back, hands finding the soft skin at her waist, the world tilting on its axis as doubt gave way to hunger. We moved slow after that, savoring the newness, her fingers tracing paths down my spine in the dim light of my bedroom. Whispers exchanged like vows. Mornings found us tangled in sheets, her head on my chest, listening to the steady thump that no longer felt so lonely. She took over the small spaces, her toothbrush beside mine, her negatives drying on strings across my living room, turning my sanctuary into ours without a single box moved. But beneath the bloom, shadows lingered. I caught myself staring at the door some nights, waiting for the click that would empty the room, old fears whispering that this too would fade. She sensed it, would pull me close with a sigh that carried the weight of understanding, her breath warm against my neck. "We are here now," she would murmur. And for a while, it was enough. Fall arrived with a chill that seeped through the windows, leaves turning the parks into carpets of fire. We wandered Central Park one crisp afternoon, her arm linked through mine, crunching over paths lined with vendors hawking hot cider. She stopped at a street artist, watching him sketch passers-by with quick, sure strokes, and nudged me forward. "Draw her," she said to him, but he shook his head, gesturing to his line. So she took the charcoal herself, her hand smudged black as she captured my profile on a scrap of paper, eyes fierce with concentration. I kept that sketch folded in my wallet, a talisman against the doubts that crept in during long workdays, when client emails piled up and her shoots took her away for hours. She came home late one night, smelling of rain and city grit, collapsing onto the couch with a groan. "Rough day." I rubbed her shoulders, feeling the knots like ropes under her skin, and she leaned into it, eyes closing in relief. "Tell me," I said. And she did, words pouring out about a client who demanded perfection in chaos, about the way the lens sometimes lied, hiding the cracks. I held her through it, my own tensions easing in the act of listening, and when she turned, pulling me down with her, the kiss tasted of salt and surrender. We made love there, slow and unhurried, the city's hum a distant lullaby. Yet the balance tipped subtly. Her energy pulling me from my routines. Sketches abandoned for spontaneous drives to the Jersey Shore, where waves crashed against dunes and she photographed me against the horizon. Salt spray tangling my hair. I loved it. The freedom she coaxed out. But back in the apartment, guilt gnawed at unfinished projects. Deadlines looming like storm clouds. One evening, as snow flurried past the window, she planned a weekend escape to the Catskills. A cabin she had found online, promising quiet and starlit skies. I hesitated. Laptop open to a proposal due Monday. But her eyes, pleading and bright, won out. "Pack light," she said, kissing my forehead. And I did, folding worries away with my sweaters. The drive up was filled with her playlists. Indie tracks with lyrics that cut too close. Her hand on my thigh as highways gave way to winding roads flanked by evergreens. The cabin was small, wood-paneled and drafty. But the fireplace crackled to life under her care, casting golden light over the rug where we spread blankets and unpacked takeout from a nearby town. That night, as flames danced shadows on the walls, she traced my scars, the invisible ones from years of holding back, and shared hers in turn, voice cracking on memories of a mother who never understood. We cried then, tears mingling on pillows. And in the rawness, I felt seen. Truly. For the first time. She took over not just my days, but the hidden corners of my heart, filling them with a light that scared me as much as it healed. Winter deepened, blanketing the city in white, turning walks to the corner bodega into adventures through drifts that swallowed our boots. Rose thrived in it, bundling us up for sledding in Prospect Park, her laughter echoing as we tumbled down hills, cheeks flushed and noses running. I followed, breathless, the cold sharpening every sensation, her gloved hand and mine a lifeline against the bite. Back home, we built nests of blankets, marathoning old films on her projector, grainy black and white stories of women who loved fiercely and paid dearly. She would pause them at pivotal moments, dissecting glances and unspoken words, her insights peeling back layers I had never seen. It made me think of us, how our own story unfolded in silences as much as speeches, in the way she knew when to hold me without asking why. But cracks appeared, subtle at first, like hairline fractures in ice. My freelance load ramped up, late nights blurring into bleary mornings. And she started filling her calendar with shoots that stretched into weeks. Gigs in LA and Chicago that pulled her away. The apartment felt echoey without her. My sketches turning abstract. Jagged lines that mirrored the twist in my chest. She called every night, voice tinny through the phone, promising souvenirs and stories. But the distance gnawed, amplifying doubts I thought we had buried. One call ended abruptly, static swallowing her words. And I sat on the bed, phone cold in my lap, staring at the wall where her Polaroids hung crooked. A sigh escaped me, heavy and unbidden, the kind that carries the weight of unspoken fears. Was this how it started? The slow drift that became a chasm. I pushed it down, focusing on the glow of my screen. But sleep came fitful, dreams tangled with her face fading into fog. She returned with windburned cheeks and a bag of seashell souvenirs from some California beach, dropping it at my feet with a grin that did not quite reach her eyes. "Missed you." The hug was fierce, her body fitting against mine like puzzle pieces. But I felt the tremor in her arms, the unspoken strain. We made dinner together, chopping vegetables in companionable quiet. But my knife slipped, nicking my finger, and she bandaged it with gentle curses, her touch lingering. That night, as snow tapped the window like impatient fingers, we talked, really talked, sprawled on the floor with wine warming our veins. She confessed the pressure, the way her passion for the lens sometimes blinded her to the life waiting at home. How fear of settling whispered that she was not enough. I admitted my own shadows, the terror that her light would burn too bright, leaving me in ashes. Our words wove together, fragile threads mending the gaps. And when she kissed me, it was with a desperation that mirrored my own. Spring thawed the streets, puddles reflecting blue skies as we ventured out more, her camera capturing the bloom of cherry blossoms in Washington Square. I joined her on a shoot one day, a portrait session in a loft downtown, watching her direct models with quiet authority. adjusting lights until the perfect glow caught their features. It awed me. Her command of fleeting moments. And when she turned the lens on me during a break, insisting on a candid, I flushed under the scrutiny, but held still, letting her see. The photo she showed me later, printed on glossy paper, stole my breath, my eyes alive in a way that felt foreign yet true. "You are beautiful when you let go," she said, framing my face in her hands. And I believed her. In that suspended heartbeat before the world rushed back. Yet the pull of our separate orbits grew. A big project landed for me. Rebranding a startup in Midtown. Meetings bleeding into evenings, leaving me drained and distant. Rose landed a series for a magazine. Urban Decay across the Rust Belt. Weeks on the road starting in Pittsburgh. We said goodbye at Penn Station. Her backpack heavy with gear. My arms around her neck as trains rumbled below. "Right, me?" I whispered. And she nodded. But the platform felt colder as she boarded, waving until the doors sealed her away. The apartment echoed without her footsteps, the silence pressing in like an uninvited guest. I threw myself into work. Designs flowing freer than before. Infused with the colors she loved. Deep crimsons and stormy blues. Letters came. Not emails but actual postcards. Stamped from Cleveland and Detroit. Her scrawl filling the backs with snippets of grit and grace. A photo attached of rusted bridges at dawn. They propped on my desk. Anchors in the storm of deadlines. One night. Exhaustion won. And I cried over a sketch that would not cooperate. Tears blurring lines that mocked my efforts. A sigh rattled out. Deep from the belly. And I curled on the couch. Her scarf still draped over the arm. Carrying faint traces of her scent. The phone buzzed. Her face lighting the screen. And her voice, tired but warm, pulled me through. Stories of abandoned factories where light pierced like hope. She came back changed. Not in big ways. But in the quiet hollows under her eyes. The way she hesitated before unpacking. We walked the High Line that first day. Rails overgrown with wildflowers. Her hand in mine as tourists milled around. "Tell me everything," I said. And she did. Haltingly at first. Then in a rush. About the beauty in broken things. How the trip had cracked open her own fractures. I listened. Heart aching with the distance we had bridged and the one still yawning. Summer heat returned. Waves of it rolling off the pavement. Driving us to Coney Island for relief. The boardwalk alive with screams from the cyclone and the salty tang of fries. She dared me onto the Wonder Wheel. Gondolas swaying high above the Atlantic. And up there? With the city a distant smudge. She kissed me slow. The world shrinking to the press of her lips. I laughed when we stumbled off. Dizzy and alive. Her arm around my waist as we shared cotton candy that stuck to our fingers. But the undercurrent pulled stronger. Arguments sparked over small things. Like whose turn it was to grocery shop or why the dishes piled up. One evening, after a long day of revisions, I snapped at her for leaving film canisters everywhere. My voice sharper than intended. She recoiled. Eyes flashing hurt. And retreated to the bedroom. Door clicking soft but final. I stood in the kitchen. Regret sour on my tongue. A sigh escaping as I sank to the floor. Head in hands. Hours later. She found me there. Blanket draped over my shoulders. And sat beside me without a word. Her presence a balm. "I am sorry," I murmured. And she nodded. Leaning her head on my shoulder. "Me too." We stayed like that. Breathing in sync. The fight dissolving into the quiet we had learned to navigate. Fall brought a gallery opening for her. A show of those Rust Belt images. Hung in a Soho space with exposed brick and wine flowing free. I stood beside her in a borrowed dress. Nerves jangling as guests murmured approval. Her work raw and unflinching on the walls. She glowed under the praise. But slipped away midway. Pulling me into a side room stacked with crates. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. Voice thick. And I kissed her there. Amid the dust and dim light. Tasting victory and vulnerability. The success buoyed us. But my own crossroads loomed. A firm in Seattle offered a full-time spot. Stability I had chased in dreams. But it meant leaving New York. Leaving her orbit. I stared at the email for days. Cursor blinking like an accusation. Her laughter from the next room a siren call. Tell her. I coached myself in the mirror. But words stuck. Fear of loss choking them back. One rainy afternoon, as thunder grumbled over the Hudson, she came home soaked, shaking water from her hair like a dog. She sensed the storm in me, sitting cross-legged on the bed, waiting. I showed her the offer, screen trembling in my hand, and her face shifted, a mask of composure cracking at the edges. Seattle. The word hung, heavy as the downpour outside. We talked through it, voices rising then falling, her hand gripping mine until knuckles whitened. I do not want to lose you, she said, eyes glistening, and the rawness in her tone mirrored my own terror. But dreams? I countered weakly. And she nodded. Slow. The sigh she released carrying the weight of what-ifs we both feared. That night? Sleep evaded us. Bodies close but minds adrift. The rain a relentless drum against the panes. She traced patterns on my arm. Absent. And I wondered if this was the beginning of the end. Her presence already fading like a developing print left too long in the fixer. Weeks blurred. The offered deadline creeping closer. Our days laced with unspoken tension. We still shared beds and breakfasts. But touches lingered tentative. Kisses pressed with questions. She threw herself into new shoots, vanishing into the darkroom for hours. Emerging with red eyes and prints that captured strangers' pain but skirted our own. I walked the city alone more. Feet carrying me to familiar haunts. The diner where we first shared pie. The park bench under which we had carved initials in a whim. A sigh escaped on a bench by the East River. Wind whipping my coat. The water churning gray and restless. How had she woven so deep? That unraveling felt like tearing flesh. One evening, she confronted it head-on, setting down her fork mid-dinner. Eyes locked on mine. Choose us. The plea hung, simple and shattering, and I reached for her hand, the contact grounding. I am trying, I whispered, and she squeezed back. But the doubt lingered, a shadow lengthening with the setting sun. Winter loomed again, early snow dusting the fire escapes, and we planned a trip to escape, a train to Boston for the holidays. Her idea to reclaim joy in motion. The Amtrak swayed us north, landscapes blurring past. Her head on my shoulder as I read aloud from a battered novel. For a stretch. It worked. The rhythm lulling fears. Her fingers interlaced with mine a promise. But in the hotel room overlooking the common, with lights twinkling below, the conversation resurfaced. Words tumbling in the dark. She spoke of roots. How Seattle might pull me away but New York had become home because of us. I confessed the allure of fresh starts. The fear that staying meant stagnation. Tears came then. Hot and unbidden. Her face buried in my neck. My own wetting her hair. We held each other through it. Bodies seeking solace words could not provide. The night stretching long and raw. Dawn found us tangled. Exhausted but closer. The city waking to a world dusted white. The new year dawned crisp. Resolutions whispered over champagne flutes on her balcony. The skyline a jagged promise. I turned down the offer. Email sent with a click that echoed in my chest. Relief mingling with a quiet grief for the path not taken. Rose celebrated with a kiss that tasted of possibility. Her arms wrapping tight. But I felt the undercurrent. The way my choice tethered us tighter. For better or the strain it might bring. Spring unfolded tentative. Dogwoods blooming along Riverside Drive as we picnicked under their shade. Her camera idle for once. Focused instead on the curve of my smile. She had scaled back gigs. Prioritizing local work. And I carved out space for personal art. Canvases leaning against walls like quiet rebellions. Our rhythm steadied. Mornings of shared coffee and sketches. Her critiques gentle. Pushing me deeper into lines that bled emotion. Yet the past resurfaced. Uninvited. Sarah emailed out of nowhere. A casual how are you from across the country. Stirring silt I thought settled. I deleted it unread. But the ghost lingered. Doubts creeping in during quiet hours. Rose noticed. Her intuition sharp as ever. Cornering me in the kitchen one evening. Apron strings loose around her waist. Talk to me. I did. Haltingly. Over mugs of chamomile that steamed between us. The words tasting bitter as they spilled. She listened without interruption. Her face a mask of calm. But when I finished, she stood, pulling me into an embrace that crushed the air from my lungs. You are not her, Lily. You are you. And that is enough. Her voice cracked on the last. And we clung there, the faucet dripping a metronome to our uneven breaths. Summer heat baked the asphalt, driving us south to the Outer Banks. A rented cottage on stilts overlooking dunes that whispered with wind. Days blurred into salt-kissed idols. Her teaching me to frame shots with her spare lens. My fingers clumsy but eager, capturing her silhouette against crashing waves. Nights. We walked the beach barefoot. Bioluminescent plankton glowing underfoot like fallen stars. Her hand in mine a steady warmth. One twilight, as the sun dipped blood-red, she stopped, sand sifting between toes, and pulled a small box from her pocket, velvet soft under my palm. Inside, a ring, simple silver twisted like vines, no diamond but etched with tiny lenses. Not a proposal, she said, cheeks flushing, but a promise. To keep choosing us. Tears pricked my eyes. The ocean roaring approval. And I slipped it on. The weight light but profound. Back in the city, the gesture anchored us. But life tested it. Her mother called from Seattle. Voice sharp over the line. Questions about the woman in the photos Rose had shared. Tones laced with that old disapproval. I overheard snippets from the bedroom. Her responses clipped. And when she hung up, she paced. Fury simmering. She does not get it. She spat. And I drew her down, rubbing circles on her back until the storm passed. We talked late into the night. Her head in my lap, unraveling the threads of family wounds. How her coming out had fractured bonds she still mourned. I shared my own. The conservative aunts who sent Bible verses after the breakup. The silence from siblings who chose peace over presence. In the sharing, we mended. Her sigh against my thigh a release. Vulnerability forging steel in our bond. Fall painted the Palisades in fire. And we hiked there one weekend. Leaves crunching under boots. Her pack heavy with sandwiches and a thermos. At the overlook. Cliffs dropping to the Hudson far below. She set up her tripod. Framing us together. Timer ticking as we posed. Arms entwined. The print came later. Sepia-toned and timeless. Hung above our bed like a vow. But shadows lengthened with the days. A diagnosis came for her father. Back in Seattle. Pancreatic. Stage 3. The words clinical over the phone but shattering in their wake. Rose withdrew. Eyes distant during dinners. Her camera gathering dust. I coaxed her out. Gentle walks in the botanic garden where chrysanthemums bloomed defiant. But grief clung like fog. One night, as rain lashed the windows, she broke. Sobs racking her frame on the bathroom floor. Tiles cold under my knees as I held her. Why now? She gasped. And I had no answers. Just whispers of I am here. Repeated like a prayer. We flew west the next day. The plane droning over Rockies dusted white. Her hand vice-tight in mine. Seattle greeted us gray and drizzling. The house a modest craftsman on a hill. Her father frail in his recliner. Eyes lighting at her entrance. I hung back, giving space. But he beckoned me over. Voice raspy but kind. Thank you for bringing my girl home. Rose translated his silences. The pats on her hand heavy with unsaid love. And in the kitchen, her mother thawed slightly, offering coffee with a nod that felt like truce. Days stretched in waiting rooms and hospice talks. The city's evergreen hush a counterpoint to the storm inside. Rose captured moments. Quiet clicks of her father laughing at old stories. Hands that once built her darkroom now trembling. I sketched beside her. Faces emerging from pencil strokes. Preserving what time stole. The end came swift. A night of labored breaths giving way to peace at dawn. The room filling with light that slanted through blinds. Rose collapsed against me in the hallway. Grief pouring out in waves. My shirt soaked as I rocked her. Words failing but presence enough. We stayed through the funeral. A small affair under pines. Her eulogy steady until the last line. Voice breaking on love you, Dad. The flight back was silent. Her head on my shoulder. The ring on her finger catching light through the window. New York welcomed us cold. The apartment a haven we fell into. Days of takeout and tears. Nights where she traced my skin like mapping home. I took leave from work, focusing on her. Small acts like brewing tea just so. Drawing baths scented with lavender. Healing crept slow, marked by bursts of laughter over shared memories. Her showing me prints from the trip. His smile frozen in silver halide. One afternoon, in the darkroom she had set up in our spare closet, chemicals sharp in the air, she developed a roll from happier times. Images of us in the dunes glowing under safe light. Look, she said, holding one up. Us. Whole. And in that red glow, hope flickered. Fragile but real. Winter wrapped us gentle. Holidays spent baking in the kitchen. Her scones perfected now. Shared with neighbors who knocked with condolences and casseroles. We strung lights early, twinkling against frost-laced windows. Her playlist filling the space with carols twisted folk. On Christmas Eve, bundled on the fire escape, city lights a constellation below. She turned to me, eyes soft. Thank you for staying. The words landed deep, stirring the embers of my own sacrifices. But I smiled, kissing her temple. Always. Spring followed. Tentative green pushing through concrete, mirroring our thaw. She picked up the camera again. A series on grief's quiet aftermath. Portraits of strangers who had lost and found. I joined a co-op. My art shone in a tiny East Village space. Her pride beaming brighter than the spotlights. Yet complacency whispered. Routines solidifying into ruts. Arguments flared over mundane. Like her late nights editing. My frustration spilling into accusations of neglect. One evening, after a sharp exchange that left plates untouched, she stormed out. Door slamming echo in my ears. I paced. Regret churning. A sigh heavy as I sank to the couch. Her scarf mocking from the chair. Hours later, she returned. Rain-slicked and contrite. Dropping her bag with a thud. I am scared too, she admitted. Voice small. Of this becoming all we are. We talked then. Raw and unfiltered. Peeling back fears of monotony. Of love curdling into habit. Her hand found mine. Squeeze conveying what words stumbled over. And we rebuilt from there. Intentional. Planning date nights in hidden speakeasies. Weekend getaways to the Finger Lakes. Summer hummed vibrant. Fireflies dancing in backyards as we hosted a barbecue on the roof. Friends milling with laughter and smoke from the grill. She captured it all. Candid joy in frames. And later, developing them, we pored over proofs. Her chin on my shoulder. Warmth seeping through. This, she murmured, is worth fighting for. Fall brought harvest moons over the Williamsburg Bridge. Walks along it at dusk. Her arm linked. Stories flowing easy. But a letter came. From a gallery in LA. Offering her a solo show. Travel and prestige that tugged at old ambitions. She showed it to me over breakfast. Eyes searching. And I swallowed the pang. Nodding. Go. Share your light. She left in October. The apartment hollow again. But this time laced with trust. Postcards arrived. Vivid dispatches from sun-soaked studios. Her words laced with I miss you. But infused with growth. I worked on my portfolio. Pieces inspired by her absences. Voids turned to strength. November winds held as she returned. Tan and tired. Suitcase spilling sand on the floor. The hug at the door crushed doubts. Her lips on mine tasting of coast and homecoming. Tell me everything, I said. And she did. Over wine and takeout. Her show a triumph that humbled her. Yet in the glow, a deeper question stirred. One night, as frost etched the windows, she turned to me in bed, voice hesitant. What if we made it official? Not just promises, but vows. The words hung, electric, and my heart stuttered. Yes on my tongue before fear could claim it. Winter solstice approached. Shortest day carrying the weight of longest nights. But we filled them with plans. Notebooks scribbled with venue ideas and guest lists. Her excitement infectious as we dreamed under blankets. The ceremony would be small. Springtime in a Brooklyn garden. Vows exchanged under budding arbors. Her mother's tentative blessing a hard-won grace. But life intruded. As it does. With a call from my sister. Voice trembling over the line. Our father ill. Heart faltering in his Chicago bungalow. I booked the flight alone. Rose insisting on work deadlines. Her kiss at the gate fierce. The Midwest winter bit deep. Snow piling against the house where I grew up. Dad pale in his bed. Monitors beeping soft rhythms. Days blurred in hospital corridors. Coffee bitter and cold. My hand in his as stories flowed. Regrets aired like laundry. He apologized for the silences of my youth. The unspoken judgments. Eyes wet with what-ifs. I forgave. Easy now in the face of fragility. And called Rose nightly. Her voice a tether across time zones. Steadying the shake in mine. He rallied. Slow but stubborn. Discharged to home care. And I extended the stay. Helping Mom navigate the new normal. Pots simmering with stews that filled the house with comfort. Rose surprised me a week in. Suitcase in hand at the door. Her grin sheepish. Could not let you face this solo. Mom hugged her awkward but genuine. And Dad, from his chair, clasped her hand. Welcome. We stayed through thaw. Walks in the neighborhood where I learned to ride a bike. Her arm around me as slush sucked at our shoes. Evenings. We sat with him. Rose sharing prints from her travels. His questions gentle. Drawing her out. In those moments, family reshaped. Edges softened. Her presence a bridge over old divides. Back in New York. Spring burst full. Tulips rioting in planters as wedding prep ramped. Dresses fitted in sunlit ateliers. Her in lace that hugged curves. Mine simple silk that flowed like water. Doubts nipped at heels. What ifs about forever. But we talked them through. Her touch dispelling shadows. Sighs shared in the quiet before sleep. The day arrived humid and bright. Garden alive with bees and chatter. Friends in sundresses milling under strung lights. Vows came halting. Mine choked on tears as I promised to choose her daily. Her voice steady. Eyes locked. In sickness and shoots. In doubt and dawn. Rings exchanged. Simple bands etched with dates. And the kiss sealed it. Cheers erupting like fireworks. The reception spilled into evening. Tables laden with her scones and my sketched menus. Dances under lanterns to songs that made us sway close. Later. Alone in our apartment. Petals scattered on the bed. We made love slow. Reverent. Her whispers mapping futures we built together. Summer followed golden. Honeymoon in the Berkshires. Cabins by lakes where loons called at dusk. Her camera capturing dips in cool water. My sketches of her sleeping form. Back home. Life settled into married cadence. Rings catching light as hands intertwined over breakfast. Her darkroom humming with new projects. My studio alive with commissions that sang true. Yet challenges wove in. A miscarriage scare early on. When we decided to try for a family. The loss a quiet gut punch that left us hollow for weeks. She grieved fierce. Darkroom abandoned. And I held space. Walks in the ramble where birdsong filled silences. Therapy came next. Sessions in a sunlit office. Words unpacking layers. Her hand in mine through breakthroughs. Healing bloomed uneven. Marked by adoptions explored. Papers stacking on the desk. Dreams shifting shapes. Fall brought a placement. A toddler with wide eyes and curls like hers. Foster papers signed with trembling hands. The first night. Her cries piercing the dark. Rose rocking her gentle. Me brewing tea at dawn. The three of us a tentative trio. Winter tested us. Holidays with extended family. Navigations of questions and judgments. But we stood firm. Her mother's slow embrace a victory. My sister's support a balm. The girl? Named Willow after the tree outside our window. Settled. Giggles filling halls. Her tiny hand in ours on park swings. Spring circled back. Willow toddling in grass as we renewed informal vows under that same arbor. Her laughter the music. Rose published a book. Images of us woven with strangers' tales. Resilience in frames. And I illustrated the cover. Lines flowing free. Years layered like sediment. Challenges met with sighs and strategies. Joy savored in stolen glances. She took over my life. Yes. But in the taking. Gave back whole worlds. Her light not consuming but kindling my own. In quiet moments. Her head on my shoulder as Willow slept between. I traced the ring on her finger. Gratitude deep as breath. And in the end? It was not takeover but transformation. Two lives braided into one tapestry. threads of doubt and delight woven tight. We stood on that rooftop where it began. City sprawling below. Her hand warm in mine. The future a horizon we chased together. Hearts full. Echoes of sighs, now songs of surrender to what endures.